There we go. Matt, I appreciate you coming on, sir. Absolute pleasure. I've been listening to your music a little bit now recently, and I love it, man. It's great.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Fantastic stuff. And that's all the time we have. Matt, thank you so much for coming on. It's an absolute pleasure. And no, but I wanted to start here with you though. When was the first time you were introduced to blues music, if you can recall?
I can recall. My father's a guitarist, so I grew up in a house full of blues and early rock and roll. Whether it was him listening to it on the radio or he had a band when I grew up, so there would be rehearsals weekly at the house, or I would be going to his gigs. I don't remember the exact first song I heard, but I remember early on hearing a lot of Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley, Muddy Waters, B.B. King in the house. I started playing guitar when I was 13, and by 14, 15, I was pretty much completely obsessed with traditional blues music. So from a pretty young age, and kind of unique because I grew up in New England. It's not exactly, it's not like growing up in Memphis or Clarksdale or something where it's blues everywhere.
Mhm. Was there a lot of different kind of blues groups around you? There are not, maybe not a lot, but were there some in your area that were performing like your father's group and such? There was kind of these bands that were around at least playing this kind of sound.
Yeah. My father's band was more of a classic rock band that played some blues. I wouldn't call they were not a quote unquote blues band. They would play some blues, and my father loves blues and would play blues guitar around the house. Once I dove in, and it was pretty much all I was doing, playing guitar and listening to music. I was lucky enough to have my father would bring me out to live concerts, concerts all the way down, really nightclubs, because blues was not really, it's not like you're going to stadiums and seeing blues too often. So he would figure out, weekends, Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, we'd find out, and in New England where there would be a band, whether it's at the time there were actually kind of a lot of New England regional local blues bands. And we started there, and then we would go to those clubs, and you would look at the calendar and you would see, oh, there's a band coming in, on tour. And a lot of times my father would know who they were, he was aware of it, and we would start going to see those guys. So that was basically my whole, from age 15 up until I graduated high school, it pretty much revolved around playing guitar and going to see bands when I wasn't in school,
And was that around the same time, kind of 15-ish, that you're picking up the guitar yourself?
I started when I was 13, but like really actually being able to play the instrument a little bit and make music with other people was when I was probably about 15. And I joined my father's band when I was about 16. So then I started doing gigs with him on the weekends too.
How did that feel from going to see him to being a part of the music that was being played?
Cool. I mean, it was awesome. That's all I wanted to do. So it was great to and make money. Being 16 and being able to go out on the weekend, make $100 or $75 to play guitar. That's pretty cool.
That's good money back then.
Yeah, as a kid.
Absolutely. That $100.
I don't think money's changed much for little club dates around New England. I think you're lucky to make $100. You're just playing the small club still, and this is years later.
It's different when you're 60. Like, it's like, oh yeah, I can spread this out a bit.
Right.
This will last longer, which is great. Outside of blues though, what were you kind of getting into music wise? What kind of were you lending your ear to?
In my teens, it was mostly blues. There was a small portion of where I was listening to popular music at the time, like Oasis. There was a couple new bands, like I like Lenny Kravitz and stuff. Not that they're new bands, but current bands back then. But really, I didn't listen to much modern music in my teens all the way up. I didn't really start listening to modern music till my 20s. The newest stuff I was listening to was like from the 60s. I was listening to Hendrix or The Doors or stuff like that, Allman Brothers. But I really had the blinders on with traditional blues. I was really, really, especially 16, 17, 18, 19. As I got a little bit in my later teens, I only really wanted to listen to late 50s and early 60s blues music and some jazz. I can't play jazz, but I really enjoy listening to it, like, 50s and 60s jazz. But that was it. I'm kind of unique in that way. I think, like, growing up, I didn't have a lot of friends that were we didn't really at my age that had the same taste in music. You know, I had a little garage band that we'd play Oasis or whatever here or there, but that went away pretty quick as soon as I was like actually able to go do gigs with my father's band and stuff.
Yeah, left that behind. You said no more Gallagher's. That's it. We're done. We're done with this.
I still like Oasis. They're cool, you know, but yeah, no, I wasn't playing that music anymore.
Right. Do you feel like your environment affects the music that you either consume or create eventually? Like, just, I mean, being exposed to what you're being, and this isn't just towards you, but this is towards everybody, being kind of in the you said New England, right? That you were kind of
Yeah,
based in at growing up.
growing up. Yep. Yes.
Yeah. Do you feel like that kind of lended itself to kind of craft your own sound?
Yeah. I don't know if New England did it. I think the environment I put myself in, like going to see these older blues guys all the time, and then I would ask them for guitar lessons, and I would go spend a lot of time with these blues guys, you know, taking guitar lessons and music lessons, and then they would hit me to what to listen to. In that regard, it influenced me. Me growing up in southern New Hampshire and hanging out in my front yard, I don't think that colored the soundtrack of my future music. Later in life, when I moved to Los Angeles in my early 20s, and I would say that did, and when I started traveling a lot around that time, playing music, I would say that did. But really, seeing live music for me, I think, is where I get inspiration, and listening to records and stuff like that, more so than, you know, my younger years, my environment. You know what I mean? I was just a middle class white kid in southern New Hampshire, so it's not like super bluesy upbringing in that regard.
How often do outside kind of aspects of your life bleed into the music that you create? Does that ever happen for you? Does it ever, like, an experience or something along the lines of that um lend itself to be like, oh yeah, they kind of inspired me to make this riff or play this certain way on this song?
Again, I think it's the same as the other answer, like seeing live music and listening to records and exploring what other artists have done, and finding inspiration in that regard. One area that not so much GA-20, but I have a side project called the Antiguas. It's kind of on the shelf at the moment because we're so busy. But that's instrumental music, like almost like psych rock blues instrumental stuff. That stuff for sure, where it's more, there's no vocals or anything, so it's more of a cinematic vibe. And for that, I got a lot from watching movies, you know, and listening to soundtracks and old movies and stuff like that. So I would listen to composers and different styles of music. When I got doing that, that's where I kind of veered off of, you know, having the blinders only on blues music. I got into exotica music, psychedelic music, Cuban music, you know, like jazz, garage rock, all that stuff. All that stuff happened really in my late 20s, early 30s. You know what I mean? It happened later in life for me. Just because I think I spent so many years playing traditional blues and being a sideman with other artists. And I don't sing, so it was an outlet for me to write music and control all of it, and still do it without being a vocalist. And so it's been a big part of my musical life as I get older, listening to lots of instrumental music and trying to compose stuff like that. So that bleeds into GA-20 because I do write a lot of the music with Pat, or I'll come up with a line, you know, a vocal line, but I'm not the lyricist. I'm not the one writing a song front to back with lyrics. I might come up with a melody or the arrangement. I do a lot of the arranging. But yeah, so movies and stuff like that, sure, I find it there.
Gotcha. Do you feel like if the roles were reversed, that you were really interested in this psychedelic kind of rock stuff before blues, and then you kind of got into blues now? Do you think you'd have the same, or I mean rather later on, that you'd have the same relationship that you do with it now? Or
No,
do you feel like it needed to be at that time that you were just fully cemented within this?
I mean, I don't think it would be the same. How could it be, right? It would be a completely different path. But not to say you could later on in life, I could get into traditional music. And like a good example of that is Pat, the singer and other guitar player in my band. He was not, growing up, he was not into blues music. He found it later, you know, when he that's how we met in Boston. it was probably 2014 or 15. He was really into jazz and he was into other styles of music like hardcore and punk and all this other stuff. He was a professional guitar player, but he had never really spent large amounts of time on blues or traditional blues. He was coming from a different angle. And he started coming to a lot of my gigs because I was a guy around town doing it, I guess, that we were similar in age. And he dove in then later, and he can play traditional blues now. So I'm sure I could have done it if it was something I wanted to do. But I still think I probably approach, when we play a blues song, we're similar, but I'm sure I probably approach it a little bit different just because I've been immersed in it now for so many years that, like, there's lots of stuff I just can't do, that if I got into rock music or more like blues rock earlier on, like I can't play fast, you know what I mean? I don't want to play fast. I like phrasing and stuff like that. Like Pat can do that, because he was really into metal. He's really into Van Halen. He went through those phases, which is cool. It's a cool thing to grab from. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it would be different. You know what I mean? I don't think I would be the same player at all.
Right. When did you get the opportunity to play with Charlie Musselwhite? When did he kind of come into your life?
I'm still playing with him. This is my 14th or 15th year as his guitar player. I got the call. So I moved to Los Angeles years ago, and I moved there to play with a blues soul singer. Her name's Janova Magnus. So I moved out there because I had that gig, and there was a lot of other blues players that were living in Southern California, and that was the catalyst for me to move. I wanted to be around those players and go see them play, because they were just playing like small venues. You could go see them, for like $10 or whatever. And I ended up befriending a few of them and hanging out, taking lessons from some of them. And then that gig with Janova, I got a different offer, and I went and started playing with this other guy, other blues singer's name's John Namath. He was living in Northern California, and he would use different bands for tours. Like he didn't have a set unit. So like one tour, there'd be one drummer and me and a different bass player. But I was with him for about a year and a half. And there was a drummer that did a tour with us that he was friends with. His name's June Core, and that's Charlie Musselwhite's long-term drummer, still in the band. And when Charlie needed a guitar player, June just happened to recommend me. It was really just luck, I guess. I mean, he liked the way I played and we got along. So one day I got a call from Charlie and just said, "Hey, I have a tour coming up in 2 months. You want to do it?" Like no audition or anything. He's just like, "Here's what we're going to play. See you there." And I've had the gig ever since. So I mean, it's luck, but it's also one of those things where, I moved across the country alone in my early 20s, not knowing anybody except for this one person that was hiring me for a gig, and then hustled 7 days a week, going out, networking, playing gigs, and working your way up. So I think it was a mix of both, but definitely luck played into it.
Sure. Do you feel like luck overrides right place at right time, or vice versa, that you got to be at the right place at the right time more than having luck?
I feel like right place at the right time is luck.
A little bit
right?
of both.
Yeah, you're lucky to be there, right? Because if you didn't have luck, you probably wouldn't be in the right place at the right time.
It's true. It's very true. That I can't argue with that. I can't. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I enjoyed the answer. I didn't know that there's a third option, but there is.
Well, I feel like maybe the question would be, you think, is luck more important than, what I would ask is like hard work? If you work harder than everybody, which one would be more likely to happen? And in that regard, I think in music, I think it's a mix of both. I mean, I know people that work extremely hard and never get past a certain point career-wise just because they don't get that break. You know what I mean? They don't get that opportunity. Like the Charlie opportunity, I would have never gotten that, or I don't think I would have gotten it if I didn't do that one tour with John Namath that June was on, and then June and I got along. It's more than just being a good guitar player, especially as a sideman. There's so many other factors that go in, being good, being a good hang, being responsible, all this other shit that's boring, but you got to do it or no one wants to play with you, But yeah, so that's my answer.
Let me rephrase that question so you could just redo the answer, because that was tremendous. That was better than what I asked.
Okay.
I'm just kidding, man. What was your reaction though? Your initial reaction when he did call you, like, "Hey, do you want to do this?" I mean, do you remember how you felt in that moment to receive that?
I was waiting. Well, it took a couple weeks to get the call. I was told he was going to be calling. And at the time I was living in LA, but I was kind of splitting my time. I had a girlfriend on the East Coast still. So if I was off the road, I'd fly home, for a week or two and do gigs here with people. And I remember it was like weeks were going by and I wasn't making very much money doing those tours with John Namath and Janova. I had a little bit of a savings account, but I mean, it was lean, and I knew Charlie's gig was a better gig, and that would obviously it's a bigger gig and it's better gigs, better shows, but I also knew that it paid a lot better. So I was excited to get the call to play with the legend, but also the idea of maybe making some money playing. I mean, I was out there for 3 years at the time, and it was, kind of a struggle. So when I got the call, I was very excited. The next day, that was like when iPhones were first coming out. And I remember I'm like, I'm going to buy an iPhone. And I went and bought, my first iPhone the next day. But when I got the call, I wasn't getting the first gig wasn't for like 3 months. We were going into the winter, and he typically takes the winter off. I forget, it might have been March or April was when the tour was. And we were like, it was before Christmas. So it was like, oh, I got this gig coming up. I hope nothing goes wrong. And I had that time to prepare and learn all the songs because there was no rehearsal, it was just show up and play.
Wow.
But yeah, I was very excited. It was very exciting phone call to get. And like I said, I grew up in a household with a father who loved blues music. He had seen Charlie, in the 70s and the 80s before I was even born. So he was excited. It was cool.
Wow. That's that. I mean, that must have been a whirlwind for him, being like, oh, wow. All right.
Yeah.
It did pay off bringing him to these shows. And,
oh yeah.
and
I mean, my
bringing him into the fold.
Yeah. I mean, I'm lucky in that regard. Both my parents have always been like, they couldn't be more supportive of me choosing to play music.
Wow. That is crucial. And it's awesome when parents aren't on board with that. It
would be very hard. It would be very hard if I didn't have it, even now.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Absolutely. It's a great when they nurture that, especially music as an interest. It's very, very special. I'd love to hear it. I read that people think that Dan Aykroyd kind of modeled his character Elwood from the Blues Brothers off of Charlie himself. Do you believe that?
I've heard that as well. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's accurate.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, that doesn't speak to the caliber outside of music that he kind of held.
Charlie, he's a great guy. He's a character. You know what I mean? There's no doubt about it. When you talk to him, he's got amazing stories, good jokes, amazing delivery at all times. So it doesn't surprise me at all that somebody based a character on him.
Yeah. And you said 13 years now you've been working with him?
Almost 15. I think it's my 14th. I can't keep track. I think it's 14
wow.
or 15. Yeah.
A good chunk of time.
Yeah.
Wow. That's yeah, that's just incredible. Charlie was also featured on the first GA-20 single, correct?
Yeah, him and my buddy Luther Dickinson from the North Mississippi All-Stars were both guests on that first track.
Wow. How did it feel kind of bringing Charlie into the fold of like working with him for so many years? Like, hey, can you help me out by playing on my track?
It was great, man. It was fun. It was really easy. He was in town. He recorded it in Boston. He was coming through. He was doing a tour with Ben Harper. And so I had him after the morning after that gig. He came over to the studio and recorded his parts. It was cool.
Wow. So it was like one kind of day to get his stuff down.
Oh yeah, it was just one song. He did it in like 10 minutes. Yeah,
wow.
Not hard at all. Not hard at all.
In and out before breakfast, huh?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Was that the first kind of or one of the first songs that GA had recorded?
It was the first batch. I can't remember. It's a few years ago now. We were just doing little gigs around Boston when we started, and we had a weekly gig at this little wine bar where no one even wanted to hear us. Like everyone there was like, the management, like, can you keep playing quieter, please? So it got to a point where you basically couldn't even hear us in the corner, but they paid okay. So we wrote a batch of originals there. Just, we weren't even thinking about making a record. We were just doing this gig every week. And then I had the idea, I had a deal on some studio time at a really good studio. It was like, I feel like it was at a benefit or something. It was like a silent auction, and my girlfriend bid on this day at Q Division, and I got the day for like a third of what it would be. So I just had the studio time. I was going to use it for my instrumental thing, and I'm like, oh, why don't we just go in and use this day and record an EP, get 5 or 6 songs. So we did that, and that was one of the songs. So it was the first session. And then they came out pretty good. So I sent those 6 songs to 2 record labels. So it wasn't done yet, because there's only 6 songs. And Coal Mine got right back. That's our record label, and they were interested in, but they said, yeah, we want it to be a full length, not EP. So if you can go record 4 more songs, we'll put it out. So we went back in and recorded 4 more songs right away.
So before recording anything, you guys were already playing live together. You guys were already kind of honing your craft as just a unit.
Yeah. So kind of tie in when I said Charlie came through with Ben Harper. That was why he was in town. The end of 2017, beginning of 2018, Charlie let his band know that he was making another record. This is a second record with Ben Harper's band, and he would be going out on tour with Ben's band to support the record, but it was going to be for a full year. So his band was off for a full year, which is great for those guys, but not great for us, because that's my job, right? That's how I paid my bills. So I wasn't sure what I was going to do with that year. I didn't really want to get a day job. I haven't had a day job in years. And Pat, that was around that time where Pat was coming around a lot, and he could sing and play guitar. So I said, why don't we just start a little blues trio and just work? Like, we can get all kinds of gigs, like that wine bar gig. Like, we can just work 5 nights a week and make money for me just to tread water, basically. But also play some music that Charlie, we play Charlie, it's Chicago blues, but he has his show. I wanted to do more of like at the time, a really quiet, down home Chicago thing. Like, we were using little amps and hollow body guitars. That's how it started. So just by accident that's how the band came together. Like, I wasn't thinking about starting this band. I was pretty content playing with Charlie Musselwhite and doing my instrumental thing when I wasn't on tour, with very little stress. It's like, oh, if I play twice this week, that's great. If I have 4 weeks off, that's fine, And with GA-20, it was like back to the grinding it out. Like, we were playing like 15, 20 nights a month right out the gate.
Wow. That's
just little gigs, like whatever gig that we could get, restaurant gigs or whatever.
Your famous wine bar that you love to go to and love to play quietly at, and being told to play quieter.
Yeah, it was fine. The place was fine. It was fine.
You mentioned that you haven't had a day job in a couple of years. What were some of your day jobs leading up to?
I haven't had a day job in like 20 years. I had jobs when I dropped out of music college for about 8 months. I had a few jobs, sales jobs. I sold cars, I sold vacuum cleaners, I sold cell phones at a kiosk. I did that for about 8 or 9 months when I was 19, and that was it. I haven't had a job since.
So, I mean, first trick of the trade is being a salesman. That's you.
That's
you at heart.
It worked for me. Yeah.
You're salesman. I mean, yeah, the music's fun, but at the end of the day, you're gonna.
We sell a lot of merchandise. It shows. So the skill has stayed with me.
It's needed.
Yeah.
In any aspect, really, you're always selling something, right?
That's correct.
Very nice. And I mean, vacuum cleaners. That's
door to door. Kirby's door to door. Oh yeah, I was salesman of the month, first month.
Whoo, it's pretty good.
Yep, hundreds of dollars.
Did you get into the Cutco, the knives?
Never did that. No.
It's all I wanted to break into. It's like you got to be, employee of the month for a couple of months in a row, and then they'll like, all right, I guess we'll give you the knives.
It's a cutthroat business.
It is, yeah. No pun intended. That's
gotta be sharp.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get your point.
If you said that you went to music, or for school for music, rather.
For 1 year, I went to Berklee College of Music and dropped out.
That's more than I did, for sure. So that's fantastic.
I would have left sooner. I had to deal with my folks. I had to finish at least 1 year. I wanted to drop out in the first semester. It wasn't for me, but I stuck it out for 1 year.
Did you take anything from that year and apply it into music that you make?
Sure. The best part of that is, so I moved down to Boston to go, and I missed the opportunity to get into the dorms for whatever reason. They were full, so I had to get a little apartment by myself last minute. And the cool thing about college is lots of days you only have like 1 or 2 classes. So I would spend like 8 hours a day in my apartment practicing what I wanted to practice. So for 1 year, that was the best part. It was just like, I didn't have a lot of friends down there at the time, had a couple buddies, but lived on my own, and I would just sit in my apartment and practice 8 hours a day for, a year. So that was, I've never practiced that much. That was probably the best part of it.
Do you feel like that's when your skills were honed in the most at that point? I mean, that's a good
Yeah,
chunk of time per day to dedicate to one thing.
yeah, sure. I'm sure that had a lot to do with it. The following year when I dropped out, I took 1 more year where I wasn't sweating, what am I going to do getting a job? That was kind of the deal I made with the folks. I was like, well, give me a year where I can study private. Like, let me move home for the year, go back to my childhood bedroom, and let me just book some lessons with these. There was a bunch of guitar players I wanted to study with outside of Berkeley that was far cheaper. Like, I could go. The thing about Berkeley I didn't like, and it might have changed by now. Your first year, I went for performance, so I wasn't going for business. I wasn't going for recording. It was just to be a guitar player. And the first year, you only get 30 minutes a week, one-on-one with the instructor for your instrument. You have ensembles, and as you stay in there longer, you get more time. But 30 minutes a week, to me, for how much it was costing to be there, didn't make a whole lot of sense. Like, I could go to hour to 2 hours a week with any other, great teacher for like, $150. That's a lot cheaper than going to Berkeley and taking all this other shit that I didn't care about. So that next year, I think practicing for a year, and then the next year actually going and studying with 3 or 4 different teachers that did exactly what I wanted, very specific things that we worked on. And they were working musicians. Like, the guys that went study with were full-time people touring and doing what I wanted. And that was not the case when I went to Berkeley for a lot of my teachers. I mean, I had some teachers in ensembles. I would go, and I was gigging more than them, and I was 18. I'm like, oh, do you do any gigs this week? And they weren't even working. They were just educators, which is nothing wrong with that. But I didn't make a whole lot of sense if I'm going for performance, and I'm not really, I don't have the instrument in my hand half the day.
Sure. Yeah, I can see how that's a conundrum. You would think that they would be like a little bit more lenient with at least holding it. Like, hey, you could take this test with the guitar in your lap, but
I'm sure they would let me do that, but that wasn't what I was looking for. Yeah.
only at Berkeley that they'll let that slide. Flashing forward to going back to what we were talking about before, what were your initial impressions of GA-20 when it first formed?
It was fun. I mean, it was, like I said, I did not start the band. Pat and I did not start the band like, all right, we're going to start a band and we're going to try to get a record deal. We're going to try to tour, we're going to get festival. It wasn't that. It was literally like, let's just play this music we like and go and try to make, $400 or $500 a week locally and have fun. It was like no stress. We didn't even have a full-time drummer. It was just Pat and I, and we would hire different drummers for different gigs. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't worry about it. We were just playing blues music. If there was mistakes, it didn't matter. So it was just fun and relaxed. And, it was a time for Pat to work on singing, because he was new to singing. I mean, he sang a little bit, but that was, I don't think he had ever really fronted a band for any length of time as a singer. I think he did some gigs, but it wasn't like, all right, you got to sing. Back then we were doing, 3 1-hour sets at these, so it's a lot. 3 hours of singing a night is a lot just to get up to snuff,
Oh yeah, definitely. But I mean, that's good to get into it. Like, that's like, all right, you got a long time to, hone this in, which is, it's good and bad, it seems like.
It was fun. I mean, it was fun. I mean, I had done, other than Charlie, I had done mostly lots of gigs like that leading up, like Charlie and those other touring bands, lots of festivals, lots of going on tour. But it was pretty normal to do lots of restaurant gigs in between. You know what I mean? I would do it, you get called for other artists to go play guitar with them, and I did a lot. This is the first time in my life, well, I guess with the pandemic include that, like 3 years, like we're not playing any of those type of gigs anymore. We play venues now, almost exclusively. You know what I mean? There might be bars, but they're music venue bars, or theaters or festivals. So it's a little different now for me, because I'm not like, when I'm home, I'm home. Like, I'm not rushing off to a gig 4 nights a week to go play a restaurant. We don't do that. We don't do that anymore with this band anyway.
What
So,
when did that kind of change for you? That was like a recent kind of adaptation, like no more of this
um,
constantly going out kind of stuff.
well, going into the pandemic, we had a different booking agent, and we were going on tour more. So it started then. Then the pandemic hit, so that wiped everything out. And then during the pandemic, we left that booking agent and got a new booking agent who is very good, and can keep us busy. And we're like one of his smaller acts. He's used to booking acts that are much bigger than us. And since we've been with him, we pretty much work as much as we want on tour. And then when we come home, I'm off. You know what I mean? Like, we were out for 5 weeks, came home 2 weeks ago. I flew up for one Charlie gig, flew home. We had 3 New England dates at like bigger size venues. And then I'm off for about 2 weeks, and then we go to Europe. So it's like, when you're off, it's like you catch up, you relax. It's not, the grind is a different type of grind now, you know, which is nice. I like it.
Was that needed for you in hindsight, looking back on it now, that you need these kind of periods of rest, or just kind of disconnecting from the old grind, if you will?
I don't know if it's needed. I like it. I mean, if I had to keep doing the other thing, I would have done it. You know what I mean? Like, just playing 4 or 5 nights a week, within a 2-hour radius, just finding every bar gig, restaurant gig. And I have lots of friends that still do it. I would do that way before I would go get another job. You know what I mean? Like, I want to play music. So it's kind of, I've committed to being a musician, and whatever it needs to be, it needs to be. But I like this setup much better. I feel like I'm able to be more of an artist in this setup, like where it's a band, we make records, we go promote the records, play live, and it's a little bit more focused. I don't love just going out and doing what they call pickup gigs, where like you get a call and the singer's like, "Hey, I need a guitar player to play blues on Wednesday in Gloucester, Mass. Pays $120. Can you make?" And then you show up, you don't know what you're going to play, and you just get through it. That is worn off. It's not. I don't look forward to doing those type of gigs very often. It's depending on who is in the band. But
Gotcha. What were some of the worst kind of experiences with that, or playing in a non conventional music setting?
oh
If
man,
if, if
so many
there's
bad
if
ones.
there's some that come to mind that were just kind of the worst.
Well, I have one. So there was this one venue in Lowell, Mass, and I'll put them on blast. It was called Backstage, I think it was called. It's gone now, no surprise. But this owner would book all these bands, and it was a cool little club. Like, it was always crowded, and the audience was great. But this guy is a plumber, and whatever, he had some money. His brother owned a sushi restaurant in front, and the plumber decided he was going to open a venue. And he would come in, like, he would have the set times on the wall in the back, which is whatever, that's fine. Clubs have rules, they want people. But this particular guy didn't really know how anything worked in this space of like nightclubs and music. So he would have like, he wanted to play almost like 4 hours of music that night. And he would break up the sets that made no sense. He'd be like, first set, 1 hour, 5-minute break. Second set, 30 minutes, 7-minute break. Third set, 90 minutes, 5-minute break. And it ended up being like 6 sets in this and nobody wanted to do it. No, I mean, I played there with other bands, my bands, and he wouldn't be there when you would get there. He'd roll in halfway through the night, either on something. I won't get into that. It just seemed a little bit out
Off.
of his mind a little bit. And he would come in and have no idea when you got off. Like, if you're on break, like I could have got off and it had been 1 minute from my 5-minute break. And he'd come in and he'd be like, "When are you getting back up?" And he'd just start yelling at you. Like, and it wasn't once, it was unless you did it exact. And everyone, I remember playing there as a sideman, other people being like, "Look, that's just not how it works. Like, you play an hour, you take a 15-minute break, 20-minute break. Like, I'm not your employee. Like, it's not plumbing. I'm not out there, and I'm not, even that, like, if you're in the union, that ain't happening. You know what I mean? You're not going to
Sure.
do that." And he just, couldn't figure that out. And one night, halfway through the night, I just quit. I paid the band out of my pocket. I was like, I'm all done, bro. I'm like, he gave me the check. I tore the check up, gave it back to him. And I'm like, I'll pay everyone out of my pocket now. I'm gone. It's funny. I put something on social media. They're like, hold on, Bob, no barking. And like, I think it was the Globe picked it up and did like a big feature on it about him doing that. It was really kind of funny. So that was probably, that's one that, and it's not even that bad. I mean, whatever. There's way worse things that could happen in life than that. But that was an annoying small club owner being an idiot.
I don't know why you would trash a local business owner like that, Matt. I really don't get what he did wrong. It just seems like you were just mad at something else. I don't know.
I'm sure I was unreasonable.
Yeah, that's it. That's just. I mean, you're paid to do a gig. Just play. I mean, 4 hours. Do you really need a break? I mean, that's
5-minute break.
That's unreasonable. Too much.
Yeah.
That's too much time. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, you get to end the song and then you take your sip of water within those 5 seconds and then you're back at it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
Wow. That seems like a tough one to get through.
Whatever. It happens. I don't miss it.
Proud sponsor of this podcast is that guy's plumbing company, but I won't say it now because yeah. Right there. We'll just edit it in. We'll make sure that it all sounds good because
Okay.
he does keep the lights on here. Yeah, big
Cool.
fans of him over here.
Cool.
A Lowell, Mass plumbing company over here. Yeah, in California, he expanded the business significantly. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, it's what are those flagships? We got flagships everywhere. Yeah.
Nice.
When GA-20 started, this was you said 2018-ish, right around then.
I think we like the idea. We talked about it at the end of 2017, but the band started doing gigs in 2018.
Wow, that's really recent in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
Wow. Does it still feel fresh in that way of like, yeah, we're still pretty
Yes.
new in just the history of the band?
Yes and no. I mean, yeah, it feels like a new band, but when you're in it every day, like once we got with the record label, we were like, okay, we're gonna try to go on tour here. We're gonna make records and get a booking agent and do all. Now it's a business. I handle most of the business stuff for the band. So when you're in it all day, every day, and it's a full-time job, I said this on another interview the other day, like playing guitar in GA-20 is like, for me, it's like 20% of a pie that's 100%. 80% of it is other stuff now. It's social media stuff. It's managing the whole team, whether it's our label or people at the label doing stuff, publicists, radio publicists, venues, contracts, my booking agent, all that stuff, tour managing, maintenance on the vehicle, all this stuff goes into it. And we don't have a manager yet. I mean, other than myself. So it doesn't feel that new. And it doesn't feel like it's like a lot of people are like, oh, it's happening really quick. You've got all these records out, you're touring, you're getting these good gigs, which is absolutely accurate. It is pretty quick. But when you're in it every day, working 8 to 12 hours on the business side of it, 7 days a week, it feels like sometimes it's moving slower than it should, even though and I'm a little impatient. So it's probably not. It's probably moving very fast, but it doesn't feel super. It's like, oh man, we just started. We're already here. I'm like, all right, we're here. When are we gonna get over there? Because this is taking a long time, even though it's not.
Yeah, keep it moving. You say, let's go. Yeah.
Right.
I like that. Did you feel like there was something there immediately when you first started playing with Pat, especially since he was the only original member of the band?
Pat and I started. Yeah. No, to be honest, I just felt like we were doing local gigs. Like I liked it, but it wasn't like we did one gig and I was like, oh yeah, this is gonna do something. It took a little bit. It took probably 6 months, maybe, or really once we made that record and I got that record to the label took it. That's when I was like, and I heard the record, listened back to how it sounded. That was the time where I'm like, okay, I think we have something here, because I think the first record only sold. I don't think there's many people making records that sound like that right now. And I think if I could get that to people's ears that like that style of music, they would be excited about it. So it was more of that time frame where I was like, cool, this could have legs, you know?
Definitely. Do you feel like blues hits a resurgence within popularity every few years, or however much time it gets? It seems like there, for me at least, it seems like there's some great kind of blues oriented bands and they're making stuff, and then it comes into, kind of popularity a little bit, and then it dips out and then it comes back in.
Yeah, I think all classic American, well, all music comes in cycles. Yes. Uh, I don't think traditional blues has had it in a long time. I mean, there's been like modern, like blues rock bands, like Gary Clark is around, he's a big artist. Um, Going back further, Stevie Ray Vaughan, obviously. But an overall movement or a revival, I haven't seen. There's been isolated artists, where every other genre, to me, in classic American music, country, traditional country, soul music, even like garage rock, all those, psych rock, all those things have had big revivals. Now they're not always staying around. Like psych rock feels like it's slowing down now to me compared to like 7 years ago or something. But country music right now is just bonkers huge here. Got people like Charlie Crockett and
Hmm.
um, obviously Sturgill, and smaller acts that are coming up. Sierra Farrell, who I'm a huge fan of.
Oh, she's fantastic.
Yeah, they don't. There's not. There is not. It's not happening in blues right now, to my knowledge. Now there are some artists doing it, but it doesn't seem like it's caught on outside of that world in the same way as the other genres. Like one cat that is just fantastic is John Tavius Willis. He's got one album out. He's a buddy of ours. He lives down in Georgia, and he's on a lot of the blues festivals and stuff like that, and folk stuff. But he's amazing. He's one. Cedric Burnside's another one. I think he's doing it. But there's isolated, but it doesn't seem like there's this movement yet of excitement from the public for whatever reason. I think blues has a bad PR problem. I think people hear the word blues and they're like, oh, I don't like blues, or my parents listen to blues, or the word blues means something to someone that doesn't really listen to blues. Like right now, blues, a lot of people think of blues. If they just go to a blues festival, most of the acts are like modern blues rock acts, which is nothing wrong with that. It's totally cool. There's some really good ones. But when I hear the word blues, that's not the music that I think of. Or if you go to my record collection, that you're going to see Magic Sam, Otis Rush, Gatemouth Brown, Johnny Guitar Watson, early Buddy Guy, Junior Wells, all these records that sound completely different. It sounds like a different style of music than that blues rock stuff. That's the kind of music that everyone in GA-20 listens to, and kind of what we initially based the band off of were records that sounded like that, and songs that were composed like that, and the playing was approaching that style of ensemble playing. So I don't know if it's that deep for people that don't know anything about blues, but I feel like if they saw those acts like Magic Sam or Otis Rush in the 60s at, I don't know, a Newport Folk Fest, it wouldn't be like, oh, I don't like blues. I think they would lose their minds, And I'm not comparing ourselves to any of those greats, but that style of blues, I think.
You just did, man. You were on the record as saying
Yeah.
that you
Oh, I
are on
know.
par with them. That
Yeah.
you
Okay.
just said that, man. I didn't say it.
Yeah. But I don't know. So I think there needs to be, a slightly different approach, and just more acts doing it, more acts kind of like embracing. Like we've had so many people tell us, don't call it blues. Even do what you're doing, just don't call it blues music, call it rock and roll. And it will be a lot easier. And maybe it would, but it's a blues band, at least for now. You know what I mean? We're playing blues music. So I hope it catches on. I mean, we're trying to play lots of different style shows. We're trying to get on lots of different music festivals that are not just blues festivals. We're playing a big mix. Like we're playing a lot of rock clubs. They're not, we might be the only blues band playing there, all year or a month or whatever. Just try to reach people that might not, if you stay in that blues world exclusively, a lot of people might not find you.
Gotcha. Do you see a full kind of revamp or are revamping an interest from the public for blues
Well,
further down the line?
that's what we're trying to do from our little space. You know what I mean? I want people to hear us. I mean, it happens all the time. We play these gigs, and at the end of the night, people come up to us like, "What kind of music was that?" And I'm like, "It's blues music." No, that's not blues. They don't know. They don't listen to that style, you know.
And
And we want all
you're
the
changing
band. I
that.
want all. I don't like a lot of acts come in and they say, "Oh, I want young people," or "I want this scene. I want the jam band scene. I want, you know, this scene." We want them all. We want to be the blues band that's on all the festival, like all the different style festivals. Like we played jam band festivals this past summer. It was great. I want to play blues festivals, folk festivals, all of it. There's, you know what I mean? Good music is good music, and it's American music. I think it fits in that. I don't like saying that word, but like Americana, you know what I mean? Like we're happy to be the blues band in that space, you know?
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you feel like blues has lasted from its inception to even now because it is rooted in so many different genres of music? Like if you trace it back, it's like, okay, this was obviously inspired by like, Elmore James or somebody like that. Do you feel like it's just deeply embedded within even rock
Well,
and
I
all
think it's
these
the other,
different?
I think it's the other, well, maybe I'm thinking of it differently the way you're saying. I think all those other styles came from blues.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
is
yes. So
that's what
yeah,
I'm
of
saying.
course. I think blues is
I
more,
tried to say it, Matt. I did, but
yeah.
again, you are
But,
you're master talker. I'm not. I'm
uh,
gonna I'm gonna give you the helm for the next couple of minutes. You just go ahead, please.
I think I said everything. I got nothing.
But yeah, all these different kind of genres are based within like, hey, this is blues, and it obviously
Or
not
influence from
offshoot.
blues. You know, I mean, there's a blurry line too, man. Like lots of country music and blues, when you go back to the traditional styles, are very similar. You know what I mean? They're interchangeable in a lot of ways. The same thing with jazz. I mean, so yeah, I don't think people always think that way, but like a lot of these country artists I'm talking about, uh, like Coulter Wall, you listen to it, it's definitely country music. There's no doubt about it. But I can hear elements of blues in almost every one of his songs. You know what I mean? Whether it's a guitar riff or, you know, just the way he's singing it, or you know. So I think it's interchangeable. You know.
I mean, absolutely. Um, GA-20 consists of Pat, who we've talked about,
Mhm.
we mentioned before, and Tim and yourself. Though it's a trio, correct?
That's it. Yep, three of us.
But there's no bass player. It's
There's no
you and
big
Pat playing guitar. How was that a conscious decision to really like we'll just have two guitars and no bass, and kind of because it seems like you guys trade off in the aspects of playing, what would be a bass kind of line, but with on a it's transferring it to the guitar. Am I right in saying that, sir?
You're right. You're correct.
All
Yes.
right.
And it was a conscious decision to start, mainly two reasons. Reason one, I wanted to keep it simple and we wanted to make money, right? So like playing these little gigs that's not huge budget, so more people, less money. But also lots of these Chicago blues records that I was talking about or haven't talked about and will talk about didn't have bass. There was two guitars, drums, and a harmonica player or singer. Um, so it was an easy thing to do because there was lots of reference points in Chicago blues where you're like, oh, well, they did it. It sounded like that. That sounds cool. And it would so that's where it started. And then from there, we had to adapt. Like not every song will work without bass. You know, you have to figure out how to rearrange it or maybe just not do that particular song. And we worked up our little way that we weave, I call it, if when we both play solos and both play the low end. Just depends on the song. Some songs we both do both. And then after a while, after that first year of playing together, that's kind of just become our sound. Like when we have friends that are great bass players sit in, it never really sounds the same to me. It doesn't sound like GA-20. It starts sounding more just like a typical blues band or something. So we stick with it. So we're sticking with it.
I like it. Not wavering for anything.
Well, I can be wavering for some things, but
All
so
right, all
far,
right. Some things. Okay. There's exceptions to the rule, but besides that, besides those little exceptions, not
yeah.
wavering.
Right.
Um, how soon after forming the band did you guys go into the studio to record Lonely Soul? Like, was
I
it
think it was. I think it was within 6 months. If I remember,
wow,
I don't remember totally, but it was. The record came out in 2019, so it was recorded in 2018. At some point. Yeah.
that's very impressive. Were you shocked at how well it was received within the blues community?
I don't know if I was shocked. I was happy. And to be honest, the first record, uh, I feel like we didn't really reach as many people in the blues community as I thought we would on that first one. It was the next record we put out where we teamed up. We had Coal Mine and Alligator Records, which is a very historic, well-known independent blues label. They both put this record out together. And I feel like between the first one and then doing that, and we worked with their publicity team, that was when I think a lot of people in the blues world first heard about us. I think a lot of people missed that first record when it came out. I mean, it did very well when we reached a lot of people. I think we reached a lot of non-blues people that liked it, or blues fans, and they became fans. But I felt like the second record we did was a tribute to this guy, Hound Dog Taylor, who was on Alligator Records. I think that reached a lot more of the hardcore blues people.
But going back to Lonely Soul, debuting at number 2 on the Billboard Blues. I mean, did that what was your reaction when you heard that news? Like,
it was awesome. I didn't know. I wasn't even thinking about it being on a chart. I was just like, oh, we gotta get this out. I want people to hear it. And at the time, our ex-booking agent had sent me, actually, I don't even think it was my ex-booking agent. I think it's a booking agent we have now because he's a friend of mine and we've been in contact, and he likes the band. I believe he texted me. I was at a gig with my instrumental band on a Monday night, and I got a text saying, dude, I think you're number 1 or number 2 on Billboard. Like, cause they get it. Industry people can get these things like the night before. And I'm like, no way. And then the owner of the record label was like, yeah, it looks like you're number 2, which was insane. Cause I had now that you got it one time, you got number 2 on. Now it's always on my radar. I'm like, oh, I wonder how it's going to do. I hope it does really well. I mean, for people who don't know, Billboard's based on sales, right? Streams and sales. So that means people spent their money on it. It's not just like, oh, 20 DJs liked it, so it charts on you get high on the radio chart for those 20 reporting stations. This is like sales compared to everybody else in that genre. So it's cool.
And what Matt is trying to say is he is rich, and he is right now sitting in his mansion. That was paid for by this album.
We make hundreds of dollars as a blues band, hundreds of dollars.
Mansion, yeah. That must have been a crazy feeling though to have that. I mean, it's the first record being so successful.
It was great. Yeah, I mean, I'm very lucky.
Yeah, wow. And as you mentioned before, the sophomore album did quite well and debuted at number 1.
Correct. In between that, we did a live EP. So back up. Lonely Soul was done. We ended up going in and recording Crackdown pretty soon after. Pandemic hit. We were going to release Crackdown 2020, and we wanted to wait because it's all 9 out of 10 songs are originals on that record. So we wanted to make sure we were able to give it proper attention as far as publicity and touring behind it, because it's important to tour behind a release. So we put it on the shelf. We're like, well, we don't know how long this is going to go. Let's hold off, put it on the shelf. And then we had some live songs. So we put out a live EP in 2020, before Hound Dog was 2021. So we put the 4-song EP out. That hit number 1 on Billboard, which I was not expecting, which is an EP, which is crazy. And then we went in and did the Hound Dog record, which came out in 2021. And then, yes, that hit number 1 as well. So it's pretty exciting.
Wow. I would say it's very exciting.
Yeah.
That must have just been amazing.
Feels good.
I think you're hitting 6. I think you're just being too polite about it, Matt. I mean, you obviously are a tremendous musician to have these accolades. I'll say it for you. All right.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
You got it.
Yeah. Thanks, bud.
Thank you for making the music. I appreciate it.
Cool.
And I do have a lot of pull with Billboard. So if you have anything else you want to release, we'll
You just have to buy the record. Go buy 1,000 copies when it comes out. That'll help.
Give me $5 and we'll shoot it up. I'm bringing back payola. I'm trying to, so spread the word. Okay.
Well, yeah.
The try it, you might like it. GA does Hound Dog Taylor. I'd read this, that you guys are kind of asked by Alligator Records that we kind of talked about before to cover his songs. Were you a big fan of his discography before jumping into that sort of a seat?
Yeah, we all love Hound Dog. He's I feel like if you're really into traditional blues, especially Chicago blues, you probably know who he is. But if not, he kind of goes a little bit under the radar. I think people might know his songs because other people have covered him later on. But yeah, he's wild. I mean, it was like punk rock to the bone, but a Chicago blues guy. One little thing though, like Alligator didn't actually approach us to do a Hound Dog record. I got an email from Bruce, who's the president, and he's the one that started Alligator Records in the early 70s. He was managing Hound Dog, I think, or maybe he was just a fan, I can't remember. And he was trying to get Hound Dog a record deal. Hound Dog had released like singles and stuff, but had never had his own record, full LP. And everybody turned him down. So Bruce took his own money and started Alligator Records and paid for him, paid for the studio time, and they went in and they recorded the first 2 albums. So that's a little backstory on that. But anyway, Bruce, earlier I said I sent our first record off to 2 labels, right? Lonely Soul. It was Alligator and it was Coal Mine. Alligator passed the same week Coal Mine took it. Coal Mine loved it. Alligator, Bruce did not like it. He said it was too raw. And so I remember writing back to him. I said, well, it was like a Friday. I was at a gig when I got that email too. And so I wrote back to Bruce. I was like, hey man, and I've known Bruce for years through Charlie Musselwhite, because they've worked together and he comes to shows. And so I wrote back to Bruce. I said, hey man, I appreciate the response. And he had some other opinions about it. I said, you say it's too raw. I said, why don't you take the weekend and maybe listen to it again? I said, it seems odd to me that the guy who started Alligator for Hound Dog Taylor would think my music's too raw, because how could I be more raw than Hound Dog Taylor? You know what I mean? Like, that's like the coolest, most raw shit ever made. And so he did. He took the weekend, and then he still passed on it. That's fine. Fast forward, when we were going on tour through there before the pandemic, he came out to a show in Chicago, and I guess really liked the show, because then the pandemic hit, and I got an email in July of 2020, and he wanted us to do a record with Alligator. It was not going to be Hound Dog. He just wanted us to do a GA-20 record. And I let him know that we're signed to Coal Mine Records, so probably not something we can do. Sent the email, and then I started thinking about it. And I'm like, well, next year is 2021. That's the 50th anniversary of Alligator Records, which is also the 50th anniversary of Hound Dog Taylor's first record. And I called Terry at Coal Mine, the owner of Coal Mine, and I said, hey man, I got this idea. We're just sitting around. Alligator approached us to do a record. I go, what if we did a tribute record to Hound Dog? But it's through Coal Mine, but we do it as a co-release. You and Alligator release it together. I've seen other artists do that with other labels. He loved the idea, so I pitched it to Bruce, and Bruce was very hesitant at first because he had never done anything like that. And so anyway, we just got on some calls, some Zooms like this, Terry, myself, and Bruce, and we figured out how it would be worth it for everybody to do it, because everybody liked the idea. It was just Bruce wasn't sure how it would work financially for everybody. And he went for it. And we put the record out. We went in November. So all that was happening in July. November, I built a recording studio at my house, because this was the mid-pandemic, no vaccines. And it was just me, Tim, and Pat, and I had an engineer come in and engineer it at my house. We recorded it in a day and a half in November, and then it came out in 2021. That's how that kind of all happened.
A day and a half of recording, though, to get it all down.
Yeah, all those songs, we all recorded all those songs in 1 or 2 takes. We rehearsed. I mean, we had from July to November to work them up, and we would rehearse like out on my deck outside. But Pat didn't even play slide yet. Like, Pat just played a little bit of slide guitar. He had to learn all the Hound Dog parts within a few months and sound like Hound Dog. So it was definitely a labor intensive project, but kind of if it's going to happen, kind of a cool time to do it because there was really no distractions for any of us. I mean, you couldn't do anything. The only distraction was, am I going to go broke? When can I work again?
Did you feel just really immersed within that album, just leading up to like practicing it and then the day of actually recording it? Did you just feel just fully
full focus? Yep, it was full focus. It was also I produced the record, so it was also I played all the guitar parts on it, the Brewer Phillips, the other guitar player parts. So I had to do all that, but I also had to figure out how to build the studio, work with the engineer, and then produce it, like make it sound the way in my head I wanted to sound, because that record's it sounds very different than Lonely Soul and very different than Crackdown, because we were trying to get the spirit of those Hound Dog records, which is a sonically, in a production standpoint, much different than the way I usually make a record. So I had to figure that out and figure out how to do it in a small little studio that we had never recorded a record in.
Sure. So you really didn't have any tough times or different obstacles with this record. It was clearly just super cut and dry with you, like just run the mill kind of day.
Oh no, like, sarcasm there. Yeah, no,
just a little bit.
Yeah.
Did you? What is your personal favorite of off that album to record?
I think "Let's Get Funky" is probably my favorite song on the record. It's the probably most diverse. I think if you heard it on its own, you wouldn't even know it's a blues song. And that actually was taken. I don't know if Hound Dog ever did a studio recording of that. That was from a record he did, a live record, and it was just like, I think they were just jamming, and he was talking on top of the track. And so we picked that one, and we weren't gigging much because this was the pandemic. We had a couple outdoor gigs in that time where we were able to try these songs live before we recorded it, which usually for us is what we do. Really, for me, I can see the problems right away. If I'm doing it live and I can't stop and I'm in front of an audience, really quickly you're like, oh, that doesn't work, or this isn't going to work live. We got to change it. And Funky, I had no idea, because these were like weird outdoor, like brewery gigs or something. So there was really no crowd response or anything. But since we've been touring and everything's opened up again, Funky is like probably the wildest song of our set too, I think, and it's pretty crazy. So that's probably my favorite. Good
deal. You mentioned this before, what we were discussing this rawness in that term, and I definitely hear rawness from what I've listened to from the this is contagious. Me and you, we've been clearing our throats this whole time, but you know what? No, it's good. We're on the same path here. But rawness, do you feel like that's an important aspect of what GA-20 is doing and what is about at its core?
Yes. I mean, all the most, not to say all, there's some blues that's smoother sounding that I like, but all the stuff that really speaks to me or has spoken to me as a musician listening to not just blues, most music, I like raw. You know what I mean? I like it to sound kind of rough and have attitude, so that's always been something. I mean, I think, again, a lot of times modern blues, sometimes it's just too smoothed out, you know what I mean? Even just the way it's recorded and produced, not just the way it sounds live, it doesn't sound like a lot of those records don't sound to me like it's a band in a room playing. It sounds like the drummer went in and played the drum part, then they overdubbed the bass, then they overdubbed the guitars, then they overdubbed the vocals, and it sounds very separated. It doesn't sound like a performance, and we don't record that way. We record all together live in a room. My amp is right next to the drums. If you isolate that guitar mic, you're going to hear drums in it for the most part. And if you mess up, you listen back and you figure out how bad the mistake was. If there's lots of songs that have mistakes, and we kept them because I thought the performance was good, and it would be hard to do a better performance just to get rid of that one bad note. All my favorite records have little mistakes on there, that become part of the song.
It adds to it, though, does it not? I mean,
it makes it sound human. It's all perfect, and there's no movement, and there's no ensemble playing. If a drummer's just going boom chick and guitar players wailing, playing crazy fast over it with no interaction, what do you need a drummer for? You just do that with a drum machine, you know?
Yeah. It's not mechanical. It's like you said, it was human. There's some blood
Right.
in there.
Yep.
The next album that you're gonna do though is all electronic, right? That's what I read.
Yep.
Cool. That's I'm looking forward to that. I haven't heard a blues album like that before, so I think like you're really covering some
Cutting
new
edge.
ground.
Cutting edge.
Yeah, yeah, on the cusp for sure. I'm really looking forward to that. And
We're not even going to play on it.
oh, okay.
Not even us.
Okay, gotcha. Because I'm part of Billboard. I got the little heads up from the payola. Yeah,
Nice.
yeah. That's what happens in the industry. What are you gonna do? Matt, I really appreciate you sitting down with me and chatting. It was an absolute pleasure, sir. And
Thanks, man.
before we go though, GA-20's music streaming everywhere, right?
It's everywhere. Yeah.
Wherever the people get their music, that's where they can find you, correct?
Correct.
Good deal. And GA20.com is that the website?
GA20band.com.
Band.com. And that can lead you to the shop to go
Yep.
support the band directly and all that fun stuff. Also, Coal Mine has all those records that we were discussing on their site as well. So definitely go support that. That'll be linked in the description of this if you want to go support them. And the band camp, is that also a good place that people can go support you?
Yep. Yep. All that can be found from our website. If they just want to go to our website, it's probably the easiest. GA20band.com. Yep.
Awesome. And on Instagram, is that the best place for people to stay up to date with everything?
Sure. Instagram or Facebook, either one.
Is that that's at
Oh,
GA20?
man. Is it GA20 band or GA20 blues? I can't even remember. I should know that. I don't know. They'll just go to my website. It's on the website. Click over from.
Go to the website, go underneath this thing on, if you're on YouTube, go follow the link there, and it'll also be linked in the wherever else I put this, Spotify and Apple. So it'll wherever you're listening, go check the little thing below. That's where you go support them and stay up to date with all their tours and whatnot. And Matt, I appreciate you coming on, sir. Did we miss anything to promote though?
I think we're good. Well, we're going, check the website for tour dates. We're on tour always.
All right, Matt, thank you so much, sir. I'm gonna stop recording. Let's talk to you in a second. All right.
All right.
Cool. Thank you, sir.